Alcohol, dairy, and energy, all three made the list of demands from the U.S. if it is to remain in the three-way trade agreement with Canada and Mexico, known as CUSMA.
The United States has laid out the conditions it expects Canada to meet during the review of their key free trade deal. Conditions the U.S. Trade Representative says must be met in order to keep CUSMA for the long term.
The U.S. to lift those punishing tariffs on key sectors like steel, aluminum, lumber, auto.
Power struggles between allies rarely unfold in dramatic speeches or military standoffs. More often, they take shape inside trade documents, negotiation rooms, and carefully worded policy demands that quietly reshape the balance of influence between nations. North America witnessed a moment that may signal a deeper shift in economic strategy and political confidence. Reports suggest that Mark Carney has rejected what some analysts are calling one of the most sweeping packages of trade demands presented by Donald Trump's negotiating team in recent years. The decision surprised officials in Washington, triggered speculation in financial markets, and raised a larger question now being debated across boardrooms and government offices alike. Has Canada just changed the dynamics of power inside North American trade? According to multiple political and industry sources, the Trump administration recently outlined a set of major conditions tied to extending key provisions of the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. The proposals were not minor technical adjustments buried in legal language. Instead, they focused on core areas of Canadian economic policy that have long been considered politically sensitive. These reportedly included expanding American access to Canada's dairy market, modifying digital media regulations affecting global technology firms, loosening provincial alcohol distribution rules, and altering certain government procurement frameworks. Energy cooperation and regulatory alignment were also discussed as part of a broader effort to deepen economic integration under revised terms. Rather than entering prolonged negotiations, Canadian leadership moved quickly. Officials signaled that these conditions crossed what they described as clear national policy boundaries. The result was a firm rejection that immediately shifted attention to what could happen next. To understand why the situation has drawn such intense interest, it is necessary to examine how modern trade agreements operate. Unlike earlier decades, today's economic partnerships extend far beyond tariffs and border checkpoints. They shape domestic regulations, cultural policy, digital markets, and industrial strategy. For Washington, gaining additional access to Canada's protected dairy sector has been a long-standing political objective. American producers argue that supply management systems limit exports and distort competition. At the same time, U.S. trade officials have increasingly criticized Canada's online streaming and news legislation, which require large technology platforms to support local content production and journalism funding. From the American perspective, such rules disproportionately affect U.S.-based companies that dominate global digital markets. Canadian policymakers, however, view these measures as essential tools for preserving cultural industries and maintaining media diversity in a rapidly changing technological environment. Mark Carney's response appears rooted in a broader assessment of economic leverage rather than short-term political messaging. North America's economy has evolved into one of the most integrated production networks in the world. Supply chains move continuously across borders, linking factories, resource sectors, and technology ecosystems in ways that make disruption costly for all participants. By rejecting sweeping demands early in the process, Ottawa may be attempting to signal confidence that the United States ultimately shares strong incentives to maintain stability. This approach reflects a belief that interdependence creates mutual vulnerability. If trade tensions escalate too far, industries on both sides could face rising costs, reduced competitiveness, and increased uncertainty in global markets. Few sectors illustrate this complexity more clearly than the automotive industry. Modern vehicle production in North America involves components crossing national borders multiple times before final assembly. Industry executives have warned lawmakers that significant trade barriers could increase manufacturing costs by billions of dollars, while weakening the region's ability to compete with European and Asian producers. Energy markets provide another powerful example of interconnected reliance. The United States continues to import substantial volumes of Canadian crude oil each day, while certain American regions depend on cross-border electricity flows during peak demand periods. These structural links mean that trade confrontations cannot be understood as simple contests of market size. Instead, they represent negotiations over how shared economic systems are governed. Donald Trump's negotiating style has often emphasized assertive tactics designed to secure concessions from trading partners. Supporters argue that strong demands can reset outdated agreements and deliver advantages for domestic industries. Critics, however, warn that aggressive approaches risk triggering unintended consequences when supply chains are deeply integrated. Canada's swift rejection suggests that Ottawa is betting political pressure will eventually shift back toward Washington. Manufacturers, energy producers, and technology firms that rely on stable cross-border trade may lobby policymakers to avoid escalation that threatens investment and employment. At the same time, Canada has been quietly expanding commercial engagement with partners beyond North America. Trade missions to Europe and Asia have focused on energy exports, critical minerals cooperation, and technology partnerships aimed at reducing dependence on any single market. While these initiatives do not signal a fundamental break with the United States, they strengthen Canada's bargaining position by demonstrating the availability of alternative pathways. In global economics, perceived options often translate into negotiating power. By broadening its network of relationships, Ottawa may be preparing for a future in which economic alliances are more fluid and strategically balanced. Market reaction and investor concerns. Financial markets have responded cautiously to the unfolding situation. Currency analysts are monitoring movements in the Canadian dollar and US manufacturing indicators for signs of prolonged uncertainty. Commodity traders are also watching energy price volatility, given the potential impact of trade tensions on cross-border supply flows. Investors understand that even the perception of instability inside one of the world's largest integrated trade zones can influence capital allocation decisions. As a result, the dispute has drawn attention far beyond North America. Broader implications for economic sovereignty. Other mid-sized economies are observing developments closely. Many governments face similar dilemmas as they seek to balance open markets with domestic policy priorities in areas such as digital regulation, environmental standards, and industrial development. Canada's stance could become a reference point in future negotiations between larger and smaller trading partners. The episode highlights how modern economic sovereignty often involves managing interdependence rather than pursuing isolation. Countries must decide where to cooperate, where to compete, and where to draw firm lines to protect strategic interests. The immediate question now is whether Washington will escalate the confrontation through tariff threats or return to the negotiating table in search of compromise. History suggests that North American trade disputes frequently pass through periods of tension before pragmatic solutions emerge. Both nations share powerful incentives to maintain economic stability, given the scale of investment, employment, and supply chain integration at stake. However, political calculations and domestic pressures can shape the timing and tone of future talks. The coming weeks may determine whether this episode becomes a turning point in regional trade relations, or simply another chapter in a long-running negotiation. So who truly holds the leverage in this evolving standoff? Has Canada made a calculated strategic move that reflects changing realities of global trade, or taken a significant risk against its largest economic partner? And could this dispute reshape how integrated economies negotiate power in the years ahead? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this analysis helpful, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss future deep dives into global politics and economic strategy.